So what is APA? The acronym stands for American Psychological Association, and these are the fine people that set many of the ethical standards, standards of writing, publications, those kinds of things. And like I said before, it's a scholarly writing style, so it's going to have some very specific things that it's looking for and that it requires. And it's used by behavioral sciences, social sciences, so sociologists, psychologists, counselors, social workers will all use this type of writing. There are three main things that how I would categorize the elements to consider when you're writing APA. One is the format. We're going to look at each one of these individually, but the format, the language or tone, I call it tone, and then the citations. You know, how do you handle and document the sources that you're using? And those, all three of these areas I tend to find challenging, the students find challenging. So I'm hoping today that, again, you'll feel very confident about what to do as we dive into it. So as far as format, at 8.5 regular size paper, I mean, we don't really use paper much anymore. Most of the time it's something that's digital, but there will be 1-inch margins all around, and that's just standard. It's going to be double spaced. A change now is that it used to be Times New Roman 12. That's the only font that you could use. And now they've expanded it to include these particular styles, just as long as it's easy to read. So nothing scrolly, nothing, super fancy. It just needs to be very legible. I'm getting things in the chat. Is that for me? Okay. I just wanted to make sure. It's like, are you asking me questions like you can't hear me and I'm talking here by myself? But so that is a change. And also in the punctuation, there's only one space required after a period at the end of a sentence. That's something new because it used to be 2 spaces. So it's just 1 space after the period at the end of a sentence. And then the use of double quotation marks instead of italics. So in the past, to use like, some kind of, well, I use the word flower, not flower. So it's okay to use, to give emphasis, it's okay to use the double quotation marks now. And I think in the past, what their rationale is that would be confusing if there was some kind of quotation, like a quote that was being denoted. In this case, they're changing it up so there's not the use of italics for that anymore. If you have any questions along the way, Alika, you are free to interrupt or do whatever you want to do, because I want to make sure that you get it. So I think I have another format. No. So any questions about that part of formatting so far? Anyone? Nope. Pretty straightforward.
I do.
Okay.
So if we accidentally double space, that is incorrect. Or double space after a period, that is incorrect.
Technically, yes.
Okay.
So I'll give you a little bit of kind of caveat as we go through this, and you'll see what I mean. So there's 4 major sections, typically 4 major sections in an APA, scholarly paper. 1, the title page, abstract, which you notice that there's a little star by it, the main body, and the references. So we're going to look at each one of those. In the title page, there are some significant changes in that the running head, which is this, what the arrow is pointing to, in student papers, it is no longer required. The running head is not required. It's the professor's choice. The words running head do not appear at all, but the actual, title itself in all caps, if the professor is saying, yes, I want a running head, that's what it's supposed to look like. But technically, it's only required in a professional, like an article that's being submitted for publication. So the next thing is that the title is of the paper, which we're talking about today, the essentials of cookies in the lifespan. This is 3 to 4 lines from the top. So you'll just space down 3 to 4 lines from the top and put your title, which is, it's in bold face, font. And then there'll be 2 double spaces, and then you'll add your name, double space, King's University, double space, the name of the course that you're in, the instructor's name, and also the date. And then that is really centered in maybe the top third, maybe to half of the paper, and then the rest of it is left blank. So those are some pretty significant changes in the title page and what's required. Also, to add the page number starting on the title page. So some instructors have required that in the past. I think maybe in the fourth or fifth edition, it wasn't required that way, but that's how it is now. So page number starts on the title page. Any questions about that? No. Okay. So the next part is the abstract. Again, you'll notice the little asterisk by it. This is only required in professional writing. Again, and that would be considered something that was being submitted. Like if Seymour Tollhouse, his article was just amazingly written, and his instructor, suggested, hey, let's see if we can get this published. This is awesome work that you've done here. Then Seymour would have to make some changes, add an abstract and the keywords for the professional writing. But again, the abstract is no longer required for student papers, and neither are the keywords. But here's the caveat: it's at the discretion of the professor. If the professor is saying, I want an abstract, then you give them one. The abstract, if it's required, starts on a new page. There's nothing else on it besides the abstract. It's center boldface. You write the word abstract, no quotations or anything like that around it, just the word abstract. And you put no citations on that page. It's just a summary of the main points. There isn't really technically a word limit, but the suggested limit would be 250 words or less. And you do not indent the main paragraph. So it's very, very much a block set of words. And if it is required, then you do have italicized colon keywords, and then you put the words, and usually there's 5 or 6 keywords that are separated by a comma in that. So any questions about the abstract? And I would suggest, if your instructor, if on the syllabus you see APA format required, APA required, whatever, that you ask these questions of your instructor. It's like, are you going to require an abstract, and do you want a running head? Because 1, they may not be aware of the changes, or 2, they may want you to have the experience of doing both. So I would just get some clarification if it's not spelled out in the syllabus.
May I ask a question? Yes.
Absolutely.
Hi, Dr. Hoover. This is Michelle. I am asking, does this require a page number also on this? If this page is going to be required, does this have a page number?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You betcha. Good question. Okay, so going from the abstract, so we talked about the title page, we talked about the abstract, the need of or not, and then the next thing is the main body, which is really what you're going to be writing. And the language is in APA is very different than MLA or a process paper that you might be writing, or like a diary entry or any kind of creative writing. It's going to be very different. It needs to be clear, concise, and plain. And I think this is an area, well, let me just go to this next one and I'll explain. Here's my advice on the writing tone or the language. APA is meant to sound scientific and professional. Some people say, well, this is just boring. It needs to be objective, It needs to be technical and free of fluff. And I have an example that I'll be showing you. Also, when it's talking about keeping it concise, it needs to be short and to the point. And then, and for the, condensing information down, and this is something that if you've had a class with me, you may have seen me, in the feedback, I'll say, this is very circular, think word economy, but it's very circular. And what I mean by that is that the sentence is just rambling. It's just going on and on and on and on. And it's not concise, and it's not clear what you're trying to say. And here's another thing, and I tell students, if I run out of air before I finish reading your sentence, it's too long. APA is very, very much, very concise, very clear, straightforward. And let me give you an example. So example 1, I'll read it out loud. I just love cookies. They make me so happy. There are so many kinds of cookies that taste good in our mouths that they make the best kind of snack when you're studying for your final exams at the King's University in the spring semester in the year 2021, when we will be so happy to have the semester done. See, I couldn't, PTL, hashtag PTL, whatever. That sentence was so long that I couldn't finish reading it with one breath. That's an example of what I would say is a circular kind of rambling sentence. Also, some issues to point out with this is that it has like happy faces in it. It has contractions in it. It has extra exclamation points, and just the tone of it, while it sounds like this would be a great text to send to your friends, it doesn't sound scholarly. So here's my example, my best attempt to write that text message in a scholarly fashion. So research has shown snack breaks can contribute to student success on final exams. Oh, and I just, as a disclaimer, all of this stuff is made up. None of this is like supported by science that I know of. The authors, all of this stuff, I just made it up. So Nestle and Keebler, 2018, found student test scores and mood were positively impacted after consuming one high carbohydrate cookie during a 10-minute study break. There you go. Short, sweet, to the point, communicated the information, no fluffy, no hashtag, no, I love it, or anything like that. Anything like you rock, these cookies are awesome. That does not sound scholarly in any way, shape, or form. So I hope these two examples give you kind of just a reflection of how kind of dry and just clear, concise, short, sweet, to the point that APA writing is. So any questions about that?
We did have a question a little bit back about an abstract.
Sure.
If you don't mind, Dr. Hoover, of just explaining in general, how do you construct it and really what is it required? Is it meant to have a thesis? Is it meant to give an overview of the research paper? Like what is really needed in an abstract?
It's just to summarize the main points and kind of whet the appetite for the reader, so the reader knows what to expect. You're not going to put anything like for this example, I'll just try to do this off the top of my head. In Seymour's paper, he's talking about the essentials. Well, the title sets it up, the essentials of cookies in the lifespan. So in his paper, he would say something like, research has shown that, eating a snack, snack consumption, and study break intervals contribute to student success. The study, studies have shown one cookie can make a difference, or whatever. It's just like you're taking the main points of the cookies and or the kind of like the idea behind the paper, and then parts of the paper, if it's divided into The study method, if it's divided into like participants, results, that kind of thing, it would be like the major points. It just kind of depends on what kind of paper that you're actually writing. But think of it as a summary of the main points of your paper. And your headings would also help to organize your main points for your abstract. I'm sorry, I don't have a better example for that. But if you, and here's kind of a little exercise or activity that I've done with myself, you know, when I'm saying, okay, how do I write this? What is this paper really about? And think of it, if you were going to just tell your friend what your paper was about, what would you say? How would you summarize? If you know, it's like in 2 minutes or less, or 1 minute or less, tell me what your paper is about. What comes out of your mouth? It's like, this paper is about the benefit of eating cookies for study breaks, you know, especially for students who want to increase their test scores and elevate their mood. That's what I'm writing about. Do you see? So if you think of it that way, that may be helpful too, because again, 250 words is not that many. It used to be 150, but now they're saying, you know, so there's not, you know, a minimum that you have to have. You know, it could be, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 lines, and that would be sufficient. It's just to really whet the appetite or set it up for the reader, kind of just an overview of what's going to be in there very briefly. Yeah, I hope that helps. Okay, did that one already. Okay, so here's some writing do's and don'ts, and some of these things I would say might even be, well, maybe not yet. I was going to say Dr. Hoover's pet peeves, because I do have a video or PowerPoint slide that I actually made that says that, but some writing do's and don'ts. So some changes in this particular, I guess I didn't put the asterisk, but a change in the pronoun use is that to use they, the pronoun they, for the gender neutral singular pronoun, not he or she. And that's how we used to do it, that we would write he or she or just say he, but now APA scholarly writing requires they. And here's something else too, and you know, in the example that I gave, like, I love cookies, we don't use first person pronouns unless you're the researcher. If you're the one that's done the research, then you can also use we, you can use I, you know, my colleagues, that kind of thing, if you're the one that's writing if you're the researcher. But for the most part, it's going to be the third person point of view. So instead of saying, you know, like if you're writing an article about, you know, student success, and, you know, you haven't done any of the research, you're just reading the articles, you could say the author, or you could say, you know, use one, or it's like you're the one that's really you're not the one that's telling the story necessarily, but you're writing about it. So that's the whole thing with the pronoun use. First person, I mean, the third person point of view, only first person if you're the researcher, which I would say 9 times out of 10, when you're writing a paper, you're not necessarily. And then the use of they. So those are kind of the do's for the pronouns, do's and don'ts for the pronouns. And no contraction use. That is probably one of my pet peeves. And I put it's in there for an example to remind you, to remind me that it's, you know, like any kind of contraction that you would use, like won't or can't or don't, those kinds of things, please don't do that, because it's not scholarly. And so the use of contractions is not okay. It's only for informal writing. And then the verb tense and the voice, the verb tense and the voice. And this is the same as it's always been, to use past or present perfect tense for already happened or for results. So things that's happened in the past. So my examples are study showed. So if you are referencing like Nestle and Keebler found, or Nestle and Keebler showed, you want to make sure that you're using the past tense. Or the other example, studies have shown, scores increased. So that would be the example of the past or the present perfect tenses. And then you use, not to be confusing, but you use present for discussion and conclusions. So if you're making some kind of, like based on these particular things and all the things that I read, here's what I think about this particular. And if you're going to say results indicate, that would be, or research indicates, that would be present for in your discussion and also in your conclusions. And then here's a big one that used active, not passive voice. And I think for people like that would be in English composition, you probably know a lot about this, but to use active versus passive, this means that the subject is the one that does the action. And this is where people can get into that kind of circular rambling, writing style. And so my examples are the students ate the cookies versus the cookies were eaten by the students. You can see, if you're using a passive voice, it can really interfere with the clarity of your writing. It can be very the word economy, the conciseness, the clarity of it will just be, will decrease. So if paying attention to that active versus passive voice, just remembering the subject of the sentence is the one that does the action. And you want to make sure that the right person or the right subject, that noun is in the right place to show who's doing the action. Any questions on that? You're like, I'm so confused. No? Good? Everybody's good? Okay. So here's another, there's some changes in the way that the headings are set up. And I tried to give you just an example of what Seymour's paper might look like, that the headings would be, that's considered a level 1 heading. And then that would be in bold, centered boldface with the title case heading. Title case heading indicates that the first letter of the essential words are going to be capitalized. And then the text begins as a new paragraph. Of course, it's going to be double spaced. And then a level 2 would be the types of cookies would be, and you can notice that that's left flush. It's also boldface with the title case heading. And as each level, as you progress into the levels, as the number gets higher, there are changes. But one, you can see by the illustrations that I gave, okay, you see the title, and then one of his main sections is types of cookies. So then a subsection of that would be chocolate chip. Perhaps then he would also have in his paper, he might have sugar cookie or peanut butter cookie or oatmeal cookie, whatever. But then within chocolate chip, he also has another subsection, which would be a level 4. And so he's talking about Belgian chocolate. Maybe he would have one with white chocolate or, I don't know where else, a French chocolate or, whatever it might be. And then the next category within the Belgian chocolate, he's dividing it into these 2 types. And I'm not sure that that's called Newhouse, but it is amazing chocolate. Actually, both of these are. I can give you that on high recommendation. But you can see that those are types of Belgian chocolate that would be within that category. So it's the same kind of, progressive kind of expansion of the previous heading. And that's how you would lay that out. And then I've also given you, if it's indented, if it's italicized, bold, that kind of thing. Looks like just from looking at them, all of them are boldface. Some are in regular font, some are italicized, and then there are some that are indented and some that are not. And if you have questions about any, and this may be a good place to put this, but if you have questions about any of the APA formatting, in this PowerPoint, I have given you websites that are just hugely helpful. And you can also just type in your search engine, you know, Google or whatever you use to, and then ask APA 7th edition, you know, in-text referencing or whatever it might be. And then usually 9 times out of 10, Purdue OWL is one of those, or APA.org is one where you can, and people will just even writes like, here's what you do. And so you can find pretty much anything on the internet when it comes to formatting, if it's outside of kind of the basics of what usual APA, you know, what you would usually encounter in writing a paper. So any questions about headings? Here's another thing that I will say. APA, you have to have headings. Headings are used to organize your information. Again, one of Dr. Hoover's pet peeves is that if at any time that I'm giving you, if you have a class with me, or if your instructor is giving you something, you know, like a template, or, you know, that has different headings on it, use those as the headings for your paper. And again, the headings help you organize the information. Because if you think about this particular paper that Mr. Tollhouse is written, if he didn't have any headings and it was just all one big block of information, the reader might be very confused about his, you know, the transitions from section to section. But this really just helps direct the reader to know how the information is being organized. Especially if there's some sort of, if you're reading a scholarly article, imagine what it would be like if the rationale for the research, if the methods for the research, if the participants weren't explained, or the methods weren't explained, it was just all one big block of information with the results and the, you know, the conclusions and all of that without any kind of headings. How would you make sense of that article? It would be difficult. So that's why the headings are extremely important. So here's the next thing, is the last part about the in-text, well, actually in the main body, the in-text citations. And there's one big major change in this particular edition. And I'll point, because it's the asterisk down the 4th line down, but when you have 3 or more authors at first mention in your paper, you can use the et al, instead of having to spell them all out. It used to be that you would have to spell out everybody's name the first time that you presented them, you know, in the paper. Like, for example, it would be Nestle, Keebler, Ghirardelli, Walmart, Kroger, I mean, I don't know, whatever. And then it would say 2018. It would have to be all of those the first time, and then you could just say Nestle et al. But now they've changed it. If you have 3 or more authors at first mention, you can do that et al. And the people, you know, the reader can refer to the reference page to find out who all those, who all is involved in the et al. The other thing to remember about that is that there's not a period after the ET. It's only after the AL. And then, like, at the end of the sentence, you would need to put, if it's in the parentheses, you need to make sure and separate any author from the publication date. So let's start at the beginning, because these are standard, the regular in-text citations. When you have one author, you put the name of the author, and then you put the publication date, and then they found whatever, you know, whatever the remainder of the sentence. If you have 2, you're going to put and between them if it's in text like this, or if you are just referring to them and you put it at the end of the sentence, and you would use the ampersand, and you would note it this way. So you can kind of see the difference. If you are using it in the sentence, it's, let's see, oh, I have a little pointer here, don't I? Pointer. So you can see this is in the sentence, and this is at the end of the sentence. So notice these differences here. I already went over this one. It's the same kind of thing as it would be for you know, with the publication date, you put the author's name and then the publication date, and the same here at the end of the sentence, making sure to use the comma. For short quotations, there is using the quotation marks. You know, if this is a direct quote from Nestle, and in his 2020 article found a strong preference for Newhouse, then you put the page number where that's found, that quotation is found, or that quote is found at the end of the sentence. So if you have a long quote that's 40 words or longer, you do a 1/2 inch indentation for the whole quote, and then you put at the end of it, then you put period, and then you put the page, the parentheses follow the punctuation at the end. So I know that's a little different. And then if you're using a paraphrase, like in my example, is students strongly preferred Newhouse chocolate, then you would also add the direct page reference on which you found that. And here's the other thing about references, citations. You give as much information as you can. And the purpose behind these things, one is, you know, you want to make sure to give credit where credit is due, you know, and not plagiarism, that kind of thing. But you also want to be able to help the reader to locate the information that you have provided for them. So if they wanted to go look at it themselves, that they could. If you are using some, you know, like a reference that, in this case, Ghirardelli argued that, and it was cited in Keebler and Ross. So, I mean, Keebler, Nestle and Keebler, Kubler-Ross, that's a whole nother class. But if this was something that was in their particular article and Ghirardelli used that, then this would be how you would cite it, as cited in, and you'd give the page reference to it, or this would be at the end of the sentence. So this would be in text, this would, you know, like in the sentence, and this would be at the end of the sentence, just to give proper reference. So the last part, in APA, there is no such thing as a bibliography. That doesn't exist. Maybe in a class syllabus that you might have a bibliography, but if you are making a paper, there's no such thing as a bibliography. It's called a reference page. And so you just put references at the top of the, you know, centered, it's on its own page. And then you put the author's last name. And now they require the first and middle initial. If, you know, the first, here's the example, like J.M. Keebler. Nestle doesn't have a middle initial that's available, so it's just C. Nestle. And then, and here Ghirardelli has, you know, the initials, but here's basically, it's the last names, the initials, the year of publication, the title of the article, which you'll notice that the first letter is capitalized, but the rest of them are lowercase. The only exception would be, like in this case, on the one where it says for Nestle, the chocolate factor, after a colon, it would be the word or the letter would be capitalized. So this, going back to this one, here's the title of the article. Here's the journal title, which is in italics. This is the number and the volume number and the issue number. You'll notice this is in italics and this is not. So volume number, issue number, and then the pages, and then you would include the URL, how you click into it and find it. Again, you give as much information as you can find so that the reader would be able to access the information that you did. Let's see, well, this would be an article out of a journal. This here would be a book. And so the book title is The Chocolate Factor, Brain Food, again, fictitious book. And Yardley Press is the publisher. no longer is the, used to, you'd have to write New York, New York, or, you know, wherever the publisher was located, and the location of the publisher is no longer required. So, and this bottom one here, you'll notice that there's not a URL. In some instances, there will not be one available. So again, you just give as much information as you have available to you to assist the reader. Here are the resources that I am suggesting. The APA style, and these are real, you know, things that you can click on, as well as accessing the Student Success Center if you have any questions. But these, especially Purdue OWL, this is one I use a lot because you can go into their website. It's updated regularly. They have videos. They have, I mean, everything you can imagine. Every kind of question that you would have about APA formatting, style, writing, anything, you would be able to find at Purdue OWL. And then those are the references that I used for this presentation. And that is